Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is Jason Kistler with Sapphire Leadership Advisors, and in this video we are going to talk about imposter syndrome. Yes, my friends, the bane of many powerful and successful leaders from the beginning of time. But what is imposter syndrome? And how do you know if you might be suffering from imposter syndrome? And what are some ways you can combat this enemy of success? Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now. All right, now before we get started, go ahead and click that like button and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We got tons of information every week on leadership, management, team building, productivity, and the occasional technology post. So definitely check that out. We'd love to see you back here again. And now moving right along. So what exactly is imposter syndrome? You've probably heard this term before, but you may not understand exactly what this means and how it affects people. So essentially, imposter syndrome is the idea that you're placed in a position of responsibility or power and you are undeserving of that role. Either you're lacking the skills that are necessary to effectively execute that role, or it may just be that you feel personally or emotionally unworthy to be in that role or to have those responsibilities. Now, there are a couple of important realities that you need to understand when dealing with imposter syndrome. The first one is that it is a limiting belief. And what that means is that this is a belief you hold internally. It's not something that someone's telling you. It's all coming from your own emotions. And it is a limiting belief in that it is a belief that you hold that limits the full and true expression of your abilities. And it really is based around internal thinking, because you could be surrounded by people who are giving you praise and accolades from, your peers, your boss, and you still will have this gnawing thought in your head that you don't belong where you are. It's also something that can be used as a defense mechanism for failure. So if you fail in a new position or in a challenging position, then by having imposter syndrome, you can tell yourself, well, I never really belonged in that position in the first place. And so it's okay that I failed, and it's probably expected that I was going to fail because I didn't belong there in the first place. It's also never going to allow you to take credit or accept credit or even give credit to others, because in your mind, you're not deserving of the position or the responsibility anyway. So you're going to attribute any kind of success as maybe it was just luck, or maybe I had someone that was helping me and that's the only reason why I was able to do any of these things. Now, really quick, if you're getting any value out of this content, we appreciate, go ahead and click that like button and subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you can get notifications when we post new videos. We post new content every week on leadership, management, productivity, team building, and the occasional technology post, so you don't want to miss that. And now back to the content. And the funny thing about imposter syndrome is that it doesn't even stop once you get good at the role that you've accepted. A lot of people don't realize that, but imposter syndrome is not related to how well you can do the job, because people that have been in positions for years can still have imposter syndrome, thinking that they don't belong where they are and they're one bad decision away from losing everything. Now, so far, everything we've been talking about has been internal emotions, or that internal voice that's telling you that you're not good enough to be where you are. And true imposter syndrome is based on internal emotions and an internal limiting belief. If you've got other people that are telling you that you're not good enough in the position that you're in, that's a different dynamic completely. Now, in this video, we're just going to focus on the internal voice that's telling you you're not good enough and you don't belong where you are. Now, before we actually get into what I would consider a potential solution for imposter syndrome, there are two important things to consider, and these will help you to reframe how you're thinking of imposter syndrome. Now, the first one is that you don't want to compare yourself or your success to other people. This is the easiest way to set you up for failure and to really explode that idea of imposter syndrome in your head. The idea that you would compare yourself to someone else who is more successful than you, and then tell yourself, well, I'm not going to really be successful or accepted in my role until I achieve that level of success. You have to consider that you're walking your own path, and that's okay because everyone attains different levels of success in different measures and at different times, but it's still success. Second, don't expect outside validation from others to help you eliminate your imposter syndrome. Because what that will end up doing is putting your success in the hands of other people. Not only is that not sustainable, but it also puts you in a fragile state because now your confidence is based on the opinion of others, and those opinions can change quickly, and you don't want your level of success and confidence to be attached to someone else. So now with those things in mind and a fairly strong understanding of what it really means to have imposter syndrome, let's talk about how to deal with these types of emotions. Now, it is important to consider that there is no quick fix for imposter syndrome. Wherever this came from is probably a very deeply entrenched emotional history that you're dealing with. And so you're not going to be able to reason your way out of imposter syndrome because it isn't based on reason. It's not logical. It's an emotional limiting belief. So the most effective way to deal with imposter syndrome is really to identify the triggers that cause that emotional state. You need to identify what things are happening around you that put you into that state of fear of being discovered as an imposter or not being deserving of where you are. And once you've identified those triggers, then what you want to do is repeat this mantra in your mind, and you have to repeat it as an affirmation. So speak it as fact, not, well, maybe this is the case, but you really need to speak the positive words as an affirmation. That might sound a little crazy, but when you speak, your words have power. And when you speak positivity into your life, it's going to manifest itself as positive outcomes. So you want to repeat these 5 affirmations when you're dealing with a trigger for imposter syndrome. The first one is so simple, but it's so important to understand. And that is to tell yourself, it is normal to feel this way. It's very common for powerful leaders and successful leaders who have been in positions for years, even decades, to still feel like any minute now somebody is going to walk in and take away everything they have and tell them you have been faking your way through your life all this time. So it still plagues people who have been in positions of power and success for long periods of time. So you're in good company. The second idea or affirmation that you want to use is that you deserve everything that you work for. You're not one of those people who sits around and just expects things. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this. You're someone who works hard for what you have, and so you need to tell yourself that you deserve everything that you work for. The third thing, and you may want to spend a little time coming up with this ahead of time so that when you deal with a trigger for imposter syndrome, that you're ready with this information. But you want to have an idea of some of the major accomplishments you've had in your career. Now, I'm talking major accomplishments, things that have really exceeded your understanding of your own limitations. You want to have those in your head so that when you're dealing with a trigger for imposter syndrome, you can easily recall the significant accomplishments that you've had, and you're able to repeat to yourself, I was able to accomplish these amazing things. And that should help to counteract some of the doubt that is presented when you're dealing with a trigger for imposter syndrome. Number 4 is to tell yourself that it is okay not to have all the answers all the time. it is okay that you may not be as good at your role when you're first starting. It's okay to learn. It's okay to understand that you have to start at a lower level than where you'll be 5 years from now. That's okay. But it's important to continue to repeat that to yourself. It is okay that I don't necessarily know exactly what I'm doing all the time. And number 5 is to tell yourself that failure is okay. You learn from failure. So you can't look at failure as a terribly negative consequence to not necessarily knowing everything about what you're doing. Failure is the ability for you to take new data and triangulate your direction. Now, if you don't learn from failure, then that becomes a problem. But failure in itself is actually the only way that you will grow. Now, one final piece of advice, if you really feel like you're dealing with imposter syndrome, is to get a mentor. This is important to have this outside observation of what's going on, what the triggers are that are causing the imposter syndrome. And I'm not necessarily talking about therapy or anything like that. I'm talking about someone that you trust, a professional mentor, someone who can guide you, who may have dealt with imposter syndrome themselves. And so they may be able to give you a little bit of insight on some of the things that they did to get through. And they will also be able to provide you an observation of what's really going on, kind of a non-biased view of how you're handling a lot of the specifics that are triggering your imposter syndrome. So have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? Let me know in the comments. And if you've come across any good solutions that have helped you get through this horrible success killer. This is Jason Kissler with Sapphire Leadership Advisors. Thank you so much for watching.